We're just past the midpoint in our counting of the Omer, and this week in shuls around the world we read Parashat Emor. Emor, Omer. The overlap is Mem Resh, Mar, bitterness. On Shavuot, we'll read the story of Naomi and Ruth. We read about Ruth because she becomes a Judean by choice. She accepts the Torah, which is exactly what we're celebrating on Shavuot. The story is also set at the beginning of the barley harvest, which is the agricultural holiday of Shavuot. The first 5 verses of the Scroll of Ruth are pretty miserable for Naomi. There's a famine in her town of Beit Lechem, the house of bread. So she picks up with her family and moves to a foreign place. Her husband dies. Then her 2 boys marry local girls. And then they drop dead. 5 verses. It's a lot to digest in so few words, but the Torah tells us that the events unfolded over a decade. We see a snapshot, but the roots of her crisis, like ours, go deep. When Naomi returns to Beit Lechem, she is spotted by her old neighbors. Can this be Naomi? Could this be the young woman who left us 10 years ago, with 2 young boys and a husband? Now, she only has a young woman with her, Ruth, and she looks ravaged. Naomi was recognizable, but just. What does seeing your entire family die with no communal support do to a person? The name Naomi means delight, but the name no longer fits. She can't tolerate it. Can this be Naomi? They ask. Do not call me Naomi, she replied. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has made my lot very bitter. The famine that had caused Naomi and her family to leave Beit Lechem resolved. The barley harvest was at hand. The bitterness that Naomi felt upon her return also resolved when her husband's kinsman married her daughter-in-law Ruth. The turning point in the story, the pivot between bitterness and delight, is when Ruth lies down at the kinsman's feet. This is what he says. You are a blessing to God, my daughter. Your latest act of chesed, loyal loving kindness, is even better than the first. That's what we need to do if we want to be part of the pivot. We need to make our next act of loving kindness even better than our last. As it did for Ruth, it will involve sacrifice. When enough of us make the sacrifices to make our next act of loving kindness better than our last, we can pivot to a better world. Ruth's great-grandson, you'll remember, was King David. So maybe the overlap between Omer and Emor isn't Mar, bitterness, but more chesed, more acts of loving kindness.